Hello and welcome to the Lubats podcast, episode 2. Today's podcast is on the wargaming part of the society, and today's guest is Alfie, the old wargaming officer and the old president of the Wargaming Society before it became Lubats. Hello, Alfie.
Hello.
So, Alfie, I've got some questions today. Answer them as honestly or as dishonestly as you want. Um,
Sure.
so my first question today is: what are your favourite bits about the wargaming part of the society?
Uh, I think probably my favorite part is like kind of the people. I've been there for like 3 years now.
Mhm.
So like I've known Finley for 3 years. I've known loads of people who like joined a year after for like 2 years, and so a lot of the people, I guess I've just made like quite a big part of my like uni experience, seeing them like once a week, twice a week,
Yeah.
like every week for like 3 years or so.
Mhm.
Where I feel like I don't know. I feel like also because you're playing these like 4 hour games, you kind of get enough time to have like a good chat with the person. Where with like card games, like you could see someone all the time, but maybe you only have like the 10-minute Magic game every couple of weeks
Yeah.
against them.
So because I like the longer games and stuff, you get more interaction.
Yeah, I feel like I actually do like know some of the people at Wargaming. Where like for Magic and board games, I can put names to faces and that's about it.
Fair enough. Um. So what like when it comes to war games, because obviously the this part of the society is called war games, and obviously we play a lot of Warhammer. But what other war games do you particularly like or would like to see made more of in the society?
Yeah, number one on that is Blood Bowl. Blood Bowl's so good,
Mhm.
and I don't know. There's always been like we had a campaign last year,
Yeah.
like a league, I guess, and that went on for a while. And then we had a couple of tournaments, and they're
Mhm.
like good fun. And like, there's always people who I like mention Blood Bowl, and people are always interested in it, but no one ever like actually makes the dive.
Yeah.
It's like realistically, it's the same as Kill Team, where like we've got pitches in storage. You can get the rules online, like they're in one of the Discord channels. You just
Mhm.
need to make like the £30 purchase of buying a team and building it, and then you can have a like quite fun experience. It's a war game which isn't about like shooting and killing people and taking objectives.
Yeah. It's more friendly based.
And I feel like especially like recently, a lot of the like 40k and AOS stuff's become a lot more like serious and a lot less like wacky. Where Blood Bowl has a
Mhm.
bunch of like random bullshit.
Yeah.
And yeah, you have like special dice to see like which direction the ball bounces, and like that could determine if you like if it bounces towards your guys, you might be able to pick it up and score a touchdown or not.
Mhm. Would you say for
But
a like a newcomer into it, like coming into the wargaming part, Blood Bowl would be a good like first introduction to war games?
uh, probably not a good first introduction, just because, as I said, it's so different to everything else. Like
Yeah.
you could learn 40k, and you learn kind of like the idea of like, oh, I want to shoot these. These are shooty guys. These are punchy guys. These guys I can like screen with and like move block.
Mhm.
And then that can like translate to AOS, where AOS is like a similar game where you're trying to get the objectives. It's like plays slightly differently, but it's the same like principles, and then that can translate onto like Flames of War or Bolt Action,
Yeah.
where like Blood Bowl's the only game I can think of where you're trying to score touchdowns.
Yeah.
I
So
think like yeah, the tactics involved are very different.
yeah. So on to the big topic then. 40k. It's
Yeah.
something that when talking about the society, you can't really dance around. It is
hmm
huge. What are your favorite parts of 40k?
Uh, I think ultimately everything I like in 40k kind of comes down to like the vastness of it and kind of the eldritch nature of a lot of stuff. Like, I
Mhm.
think the Tyranid hive mind stuff is like really cool.
Yeah.
Tyranids are like a really cool faction. I think anything chaos related, I kind of immediately fall in love with. They've got that kind of like punk rock kind of like metal aesthetic, and then
Mhm.
also they've got these like eldritch gods from another like dimension.
Yeah.
I also think, yeah, I love chaos. Like they're more aggressive. You kind of feel like you've got more initiative when you're playing a chaos faction.
Mhm. You've almost got like more of a fear factor as well, I think. Because like you could go up against Space Marines and it's like, oh, it's just Space Marines. With Chaos, it's like, oh, this is Chaos. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like when you think of Chaos, you think about big, bulky units. In my opinion. So
yeah. I think because like space marines are very just like what they've got tanks or they're space soldiers, where you get some like absolute abominations in a chaos army.
mhm. Quite isn't there an actual unit called Abominations, or is that Drukari?
That might be Drukari. They've got obliterators.
That's it. I think.
Yeah,
But yeah, they're the ones that are all like warp tainted. I think the ones that I'm thinking of.
yeah,
So what you have multiple armies, don't you?
yeah,
Um, what I know one of them's Death Guard and the other one's GSC. What are your other
yeah.
ones?
I've got Grey Knights, and
Mhm.
also I've got. It's not really an army. It's only like about 1,000 points of CSM, which are painted up or like being painted up as Iron Warriors.
Oh, fair enough. How are CSM different to Death Guard?
CSM. I don't know. I think you've got a lot more variety in CSM. Where Death Guard, I feel like the way every Death Guard army ultimately plays is kind of you march up the board and you slowly spread out to increase how much of the board your like aura covers, your
Mhm.
like debuff aura. And Death Guard matches tend to be quite slow.
Yeah.
Like pretty much every game you'll play with Death Guard, you'll be losing until about turn three, and then either suddenly you cover so much of the board with your aura, and you've made a bunch of charges finally, and you're on like you've stuck because they have sticky objectives. You control basically every objective, and
Mm.
suddenly the enemy army just kind of like disappears,
Yeah.
or it gets to turn three and you haven't done that, and you're on the way to being tabled.
Yeah.
Where CSM, I think there's a lot more like variety you can do. Like you can do kind of like what Finley does, where you just have a bunch of like melee units who run at the enemy quite fast, getting stuff
Mhm.
like advance and charge, while you've got like big fire support from stuff like Hellbrutes.
Yeah.
Or you can do like what the York CSM player did at Roses, where you just have like a bunch of like big monsters and like Vastor or a bunch of Warpsmiths.
Mhm.
They're a lot more they're a lot more mobile. You can bring in units like Raptors, which allow you to kind of more dynamically react to what your opponent's doing. It becomes more of a back and forth rather than Death Guard, which is kind of like very much like a blunt weapon. Like I'm going to do this. If I do it, I win.
Yeah. I know from like that game that we played where I was playing my Blood Angels. Um, I remember you. I think you almost tabled me. To be fair. Um, so I'm not sure what I did
Uh,
wrong. Or did it go to points? I can't remember. I remember doing
uh,
badly.
I think you killed Morty and then basically just decided that like that was your victory and you just concede.
Oh, fair enough. I think I was probably just after Mortarion then.
So I remember you killed Morty with Dante and the Sanguinary God.
Yeah.
I can't really remember. Maybe you had like another like 1 or 2 units of like Marines scattered around.
Hmm.
But I think it was a fairly kind of like decisive Death God win.
Yeah, no, 100%.
But
So,
yeah, I think a lot of melee armies just kind of struggle into them. Like your damage output is in combat, and I want you to
yeah,
be in combat with me so I can debuff you.
yeah, fair. Yeah. So, like, out of the armies that you have, what are your favorite? What is your? Do you have a favorite out of your armies?
Ooh, I think like yeah, my favorite would have to like probably be Death Guard.
Hmm.
Like well, they're my first army. I've been playing them. I'm building up my collection. I'm painting them since like around this time 2018. So like coming up to 6 years ish.
Was it
Whereas
the box that came out that got you into it, or was it just? Wait, yeah, actually, there's just a follow up question. What got you into Death Guard?
it was me and my mate for like all of year 11. We're talking about how we were going to get into 40k and blah 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 once our GCSEs were done,
Hmm.
and then we did our GCSEs like summer 2018,
Yeah.
and it basically we were like right, we're now free for a summer. We've got like A levels don't start for like 3 months. Now's the
Hmm.
time. So we went to like our local game store,
Hmm.
and he bought some Astra Militarum, and I knew I wanted to do a Chaos faction,
Yeah.
and demons weren't really doing it for me at the time.
Hmm.
I was like 15. I didn't really have the money to just go and like buy like a big creator demon. I would have had to buy like some bloodletters or some pink horrors.
Yeah.
So it was either CSM, Death Guard, or Thousand Suns.
Hmm.
This is I get there. This is before the CSM range refresh in like 2019. So the CSM models looked kind of dog.
Was that when they were using like the old resin stuff for like noise marines and stuff?
Yeah, basically, you know how now they like look distinct. Back
Yeah.
then, they were basically just Space Marines with spikes and painted red.
Oh, fair.
Yeah, they didn't look fantastic. So
Mhm.
the idea of like spending what money I had on them wasn't that appealing. So it was Thousand Suns or Death Guard, and I think either there was no Thousand Suns in the store that day, or the Thousand Suns units they had were like Zangors stuff, which didn't interest me. So I ended up picking up uh one of the Death Guard like tank hunters and like a squad of Plague Marines,
Mhm.
and then it all just kind of went from there, I guess.
Fair enough. Because I know, like, for a while you were able to get Death Guard models pretty cheap. Was that around the same time, or was it a different time that I'm thinking of?
Yeah, no, this would have been 8th edition, so they were in like all the starter packs and stuff.
Yeah.
I know one of the first things I bought was it was called like the Start Painting Kit or something, and you got three monopose Plague Marines, a
Yeah.
GW painting brush, and then like 6 paints to paint those Plague Marines with.
Hmm.
And at the time, what that got me a decent quality paintbrush, 6 paints I could start painting all my stuff with, and 3 Plague Marines who were quite fairly easy to put together,
Yeah.
looked fairly cool. You could get obviously there was like it was Dark Imperium was the 8th edition starter box.
Yeah.
That got you a bunch of Death Guard guys. And then there was like the smaller downscaled starter boxes as well, which if you could like find someone to split with were like really good value for money.
Hmm. I remember getting that exact Plague Marine box. Um, it was when I was in year 11, so it was either year 11 or year 10, so either 2020 or 2019. I remember getting it, and around that time, I really just didn't have any interest in Warhammer because like all my
Yeah.
friends, like I didn't really have any friends who wanted to talk to me about it. The only person who would speak to me about it was my dad, and I was like, my dad has been into Warhammer since Rogue Trader,
Jesus Christ. Okay.
so he's kept up with the lore like ever since. He loves it, and he was telling me about all this stuff. And one day I went, because I used to paint model aeroplanes. I went into a shop and it had it, so I bought it and I was going to paint up the Plague Marines for my dad.
Hmm.
Um, and then it was that and a box of Space Marine Reavers, like the 3-man box of that,
Oh yeah.
that kind of sparked my interest in it. And then I actually picked it up. I think it was just at the end of 2020, because like I'd just finished high school and there was no people to call me a nerd anymore, basically.
Yeah.
That is also another thing I want to talk to you about. Do you think that there is a negative kind of stigma that comes with Warhammer and like the society, not the society, but like the kind of image of it, if you know what I mean? And
Yeah. No, I think yeah, definitely.
like how do you think like the society helps to break that stigma?
Uh I mean, what the stigma is basically like it's a bunch of like probably like overweight, smelly, like straight white men who have like never seen a girl before
Mhm.
playing with their like plastic toys.
Yeah.
But I think like yeah, I don't think the society particularly like fits into that stigma. I think quite a lot of the people, like they go to magic, they like sure they're into a lot of like I don't know like nerd circles, but they're actually fairly social people
Yeah.
with people they have like common interests in.
Mhm.
Like, there's really not many people I can think of who like basically show up, play their game of Warhammer without really like socializing or making friends, and then disappear.
True. There is
And I
always
think
like a
like
good aspect of like the way people, I want to say, are treated when they come to the society. Like no one's treated as an outsider. Everyone's pretty much just like instantly kind of accepted. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, no, I think it's a lot of like yeah, like you said, a lot of like welcoming people,
Hmm.
and I know that it's like an exec rule that like if someone has like very poor hygiene, then like a member of the exec might have a chat with them just about it. But to my knowledge, it's never actually happened.
Hmm.
I think that's obviously like yeah, part of the stigma is kind of like poor personal hygiene, probably not like looking or smelling the best.
Yeah.
I think like relatively like everyone's quite clean.
Hmm. Fair. Yeah. I
I
would
mean,
also wholeheartedly agree with that. Like I've not gone to any things and thought, oh, that's something I might need to raise. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, which yeah, I think it's a very difficult thing for like an exec member to like navigate as well. So I'm quite happy it's never come up.
Yeah. No, I 100% I agree with you on that. So another big Warhammer game is AOS, Age of Sigmar. Do
Hmm.
you like with the recent campaign? Has that sparked? a I don't know. Has that sparked? Have you kept up with AOS as much as Warhammer? And if not, has this campaign sparked a an old joy of AOS?
Uh, I mean, I've had an AOS army since just before third edition ended
Mm-hmm.
because I really like the Nighthawk models, and for ages I'd kind of like back and forth on like, oh, do I just like get them to paint and look cool? Maybe I can play a bit of the game here and there.
Yeah.
And then when they announced they were getting rid of the second edition starter box, which had a bunch of like these really cool Nighthawk models in,
Mm-hmm.
just decided kind of like, you know what, fuck it, I'll get the box.
Yeah.
And then I played a bit of second edition AOS, but yeah, I don't know. I just think like 40k is a bit more kind of engaging. There's a bit of shooting, a bit of charging. You know, you have to like jump behind cover. But
Mm-hmm.
AOS feels a lot more just kind of run at the opponent and kill them better than they kill you.
Yeah.
So I kind of like fell off and lost interest until this AOS campaign, and like I've picked it back up again. And to be fair, it's more fun than I remember.
Mm-hmm.
It's got some. It's got what kind of 10th edition or 40k is lacking, where a lot of the rules are very kind of fluffy and very flavorful.
Yeah.
Like my ghost, one of the warlord traits that one of them can be given. It's called hatred for the living, and he gets to reroll all hit and wound rolls
Mm-hmm.
against anyone who doesn't have the death keyword. So anyone
Oh,
who's
that's quite
alive,
cool.
he's out there like trying extra hard to kill you.
That does sound quite cool. So there is like it's very different. It's not like it's not how similar are AOS and 40k in that sense?
Uh, they're similar in the way that like if you've played one, you can probably pick up the other quite easy. Like, there
Mm-hmm.
are differences and nuances, but it's the same general Games Workshop playstyle. It's like, oh, the command phase is basically the same thing, but it's called the hero phase. And then you go to your move phase, and then you go to your shoot phase, then you go to your charge phase and your fight phase.
Yeah.
The core basics of the game, you can kind of tell it's made with like a very similar system. But then there are like quite a few nuances. Like a big thing in 40k, especially this edition, is that big monsters and vehicles are hard to kill because there's a whole you have to do your strength versus their toughness. Oh,
Yeah.
I wound you on a 6. But in AOS, every weapon, like if you have a ballistic skill, every weapon has like a 2 wound, just like flat.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've got some ghosts who they hit on 4s, they wound on 4s, and then the opponent makes a save with like no AP. But it doesn't matter who they attack, it's always hit on 4s, wound on 4s.
Yeah.
Which I think, yeah, that can definitely like trip up people going from 40k to AOS. If you're used to like, oh, Scarbrand, you know, these are some little ghosts who don't really matter. I'll just throw like my dragon, or I'll throw Scarbrand, or I'll throw my Great Unclean One at them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then actually the ghosts are wounding your big demon on 4s,
Yeah.
and
People
there's no
like
invulnerable saves either.
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like in a game on Wednesday, there's this like big dragon, and the big dragon like it had some like he was like called like a rune priest or rune father riding on top of it,
Mm-hmm.
and these goblin fanatics with these big like you know the hammer throw on the Olympics.
Yeah.
It's like imagine one of those, but it's got loads of spikes on the end as well.
Like a mace.
These goblin, yeah, it's like a big flail, but without the
Yeah.
handle. You just hold the chain. A bunch of these goblins with those basically attacked this big dragon, and they were only AP2, but like the dragon with the special rune father saved on a 4 and didn't have an invuln. So it was just like make a bunch of 6-ups. Oh, it's dead.
Oh. Was that Michael's goblins?
Yeah.
What, the 120, or was it 200?
I think in that game, because it was only 750 points, he only had like 72.
Oh,
Yeah, only 72.
only 72. Like, anyone complaining can just deal with it.
It's a balanced army. It's not a skew list at all.
But like, so with AOS working how it works, Michael's 120 goblins. Would that actually be quite competitive if they're all doing like? Well, yeah, you just said like yeah. So he can kill a tank with those goblins quite easily.
Uh, I guess so. His shooters, they hit on fives and they wound on fives, I believe, against everything.
Mhm.
But he has like 80 of them,
Yeah.
and there's other buffs he can give them. Like I think he can give them, uh, plus 1 EP against a unit.
Hmm.
Or it's like anyone who attacks this enemy unit gets plus 1 AP, and then I think he can give them like a plus 1 to hit or plus 1 to wound.
Damn.
So he can get these goblins like maybe hitting on fours, wounding on fours with 1 AP, like 80
Mhm.
attacks. That's actually quite good. And they're like actually fairly survivable because you just think, what, there's 80 guys and damage spills in AOS. So like a 3 damage weapon will kill 3 goblins.
Mhm.
But it's not the case of like in 40k where you run in and there's these little goblins. I'll be wounding them on 2s. Like
Yeah.
if your weapon says wounding on 4s, you're wounding them on 4s. Like you can't help it.
There is not much you can do to like fudge your rolls and stuff.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So, uh, one of the big questions that I wanted to ask you. You were president of the Wargaming Society before the merger.
Yes. Yeah.
What differences, positive or negative, have you seen in the society since the since the handover, since the two societies joined?
I think the society, it's got kind of a lot more going for it now.
Mhm.
Where before all we had was that one terrain box
Yeah,
filled with all the terrain, which is kind of like a sandstony kind of color.
like the old kill team one.
That's all the. It might be old kill team terrain. I've got no idea.
Fair enough.
But that's all the society really like had to its name. We had a bunch of like white dwarfs. We've got like some old like board games, boxed games and stuff, which previous exec had bought, or which we'd taken from LERPs when we detached from LERPs.
Mhm.
But like yeah, we had that one box of terrain, and it meant that a lot of the time, if you were kind of late to a Wednesday, you'd get there. There's not much terrain left, and you'd kind of have like maybe 2 walls and a crater, and that's all you
Yeah.
had for your game.
Damn.
Where now, like we've got enough terrain for like 7 tables and then some. We can do actual like big tournaments rather than having to do like 1,000 point tournaments on smaller boards.
Hmm.
It got to a point the year before, or the year of the merger, where the president before me, John, he had to bring in his like own personal terrain in its own box, just because the society was struggling for money and terrain so much.
Hmm.
So he brought in like a table's worth of terrain roughly, which was like his own terrain. He wanted kind of like keeping separate.
Yeah.
Which is like fair enough, and it's like it's quite nice that he gave us like this extra table's worth of terrain for the year.
Yeah.
Until the merger, and then suddenly we got loads more.
Yeah.
I think the society is also, it's become a lot more, I guess we'll say, diverse.
Hmm.
Practically everyone in the old Wargaming society was like a white straight man.
Yeah.
very, very playing up to like the kind of like the stereotype.
Mhm. And now it's a lot more. Would you say it was less approachable from someone who hadn't played much and wanted to get into it, or would you say that's
Uh,
stayed relatively the same?
no, I think yeah, this is it's definitely got more kind of approachable and it's easier to get into. I feel like
Hmm.
previously, if you like kind of were interested in this game, the kind of only exec you had were there was me, there was the president before me, John, who was this like power gamer and would just like happily crush you and take the win,
Hmm.
even if you didn't know the rules. You had this guy called Aaron, who was the Gensec, and he really didn't like 40k. And he disappeared for like half of an academic year once just because people were only playing 40k and he just like couldn't really be asked to play 40k.
Oh,
And then what the other exec was the Lord of Mordor, who unless you want to come in and play this Lord of the Rings game, he like kind of had no interest and didn't really care.
yeah.
And I think like a society at the time was kind of filled with a bunch of people who had been playing for quite a few years,
Hmm.
like myself, Finley, the old president John, who all kind of like knew the rules quite well. And so, if you did want to join, you were probably going to like what come. There wasn't really anyone who was like a very good teacher of the rules, and then you'd kind of just like get shit stomped the
Yeah.
first couple of weeks until you figured out what you were doing properly.
Fair.
Whereas I feel like now there's a lot more people kind of like willing to teach. The exec's a lot bigger now. You've got there's maybe like 7 people on the exec who go to Wargaming, or 7 people who have been on the exec.
I would say, and I've got to be careful how I word this. I would say the wargaming part of the society seems to be one of the most popular parts from what I've seen myself. Like if you look at the turnouts, um, I know Magic gets a lot, but I would say Warhammer does edge it. I think. Would you agree?
Uh, I think it kind of depends on the event. I think Magic can definitely peak at more members, but I think Wargaming consistently gets. There's the people at Wargaming who will always show up, like Jonathan, probably myself almost all the time, probably
Mhm.
you quite a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like Wargaming is always guaranteed like a dozen people.
Mhm.
Where I think that yeah, like Magic, I've seen Magic drafts and stuff which have like 20 people show up, but
Fair.
Magic isn't pulling in those numbers like all the time.
Yeah. So that it's not necessarily that it's more popular. It's just there's a bit more of a consistency.
Yeah, I'd maybe say so. I think I haven't been to board games much in all fairness, but from what I can tell, board games gets like yeah maybe like half a dozen to 10 people consistently.
Hmm.
I feel like board gaming gets I don't know. I feel like it's more consistent. It's the numbers are generally higher,
Yeah.
and I've personally got no idea about Yu-Gi-Oh.
Fair enough. Um. So what? Obviously, you are previous exec.
Hmm.
What changes would you like to see now to the society to, in a really cringy way, honor the legacy that you've left? What things did you not get to do that you wanted to do? Almost.
Ooh. Um, I think I definitely would have liked to see the diversity of games expand a bit. I tried after the merger,
Mhm.
but yeah, I tried to run an AOS. No, I tried to run a Necromunda campaign,
Yeah,
and 4 people signed up, including myself. And then one of those people was Finley, and he just lost his gang, so he had to drop out.
he lost his gang.
Yeah,
How did that happen?
just doesn't know where they are.
Oh,
But you've seen how he transports his models, all just like in random like duffel bags.
true.
And at the start of the year, I tried to teach people how to play Blood Bowl and then like do a Blood Bowl league. I think
Mhm.
I had 2 people message me out of interest. One of them had a team, one of them didn't.
Yeah.
And then I was like, if you want, you can borrow. Like I've got several teams. Like you can borrow a team, and I can teach you the rules. They just never got back to me.
Oh,
I would have liked to have like the annual like Blood Bowl league,
yeah.
but yeah, it just kind of died off.
So would you
I know.
because you're doing a masters, like would you like to see a Blood Bowl league start then potentially?
Yeah, I think like definitely. I think it's really fun. It's a nice change of pace compared to the other games, and it's kind
Mhm.
of a like it's very much more you can kind of like tailor it to your skill level. Like if you're really good and maybe you don't want to just like completely shit stomp,
Yeah.
you can play like the goblins team, and the goblins like it's an uphill battle. If you're a bit worse, maybe you play the elves, who are like one of the better teams.
Hmm.
It's you can very much have a Blood Bowl league where if everyone kind of picks something they like, but then also picks a tier of team appropriate to their skill level, you can have actually quite a fun and like equal league where everyone's balanced. Everyone's like there's never matchups where it's just like oh yeah, the Skaven win this one.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I think also there's some really fun if you do the full league rules. There's stuff like you can't just completely hoard money to if you are winning, you've still got to be spending your money because like your like goblin who's like the treasurer can steal gold if you have too
Damn.
much.
That's really cool. I do like stuff like that where like you are punished for kind of like taking advantage of things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can't just sit on this like big hoard of wealth like a dragon, and then it's oh well my guy's like you've just beaten one of my guys and now he's a little bit slower because he's got like a bad leg. I'll just fire him and buy a new guy. Like you
Yeah.
shouldn't have enough money to just be able to do that all the time. You've got to play with your injured players.
Mm. It does sound
There's
to
also
go on.
go on.
I was gonna say it does sound to me like something I would be interested in from someone who comes to the part like the wargaming part of the society. Sometimes are the games a lot shorter and stuff?
Uh, yeah, I think it depends on what format you play,
Hmm.
and it also kind of depends on how like good the people are. But a sevens game can be done in like 45 minutes if both people like know the rules.
Yeah. Well, see that to me
Full Blood Bowl
sounds.
11 probably takes an hour and a half.
But even that still that like sometimes you go to the wargaming like society and you're like, okay, I'm kind of not feeling 40k, and then the options are you can play kill team or you might just not show up. So I like this to me. Blood Bowl sounds quite interesting, and it is something that I'd quite like to potentially have a look into seeing if we can do because for those nights where you might not have enough time or you might have an exam and you can't commit to a full 40k game,
Hmm.
something more quick and from what you've said, quite enjoyable still. might be more effective. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think Zoli played one game of 40k, which he didn't. Oh no, he played two games of 40k, and he wasn't that keen on either.
Hmm.
And then uh he played like one or two games of Blood Bowl and really enjoyed those.
Yeah,
And I think like it is quite a fun game to pick up. Like if any basically there's a mechanic where if any mistake happens, your turn just like immediately ends.
oh,
And
so,
so you kind of have to think a bit more about the sequence you're doing stuff in.
mhm.
Because if you like you do one thing, if you do your riskiest play at the start of your turn and your guy just drops the ball, that's it, your turn's over and all your guys have just stayed still.
Yeah,
So in 40k, like you can have a bad shooting phase and like, okay, I didn't kill that unit, I'll just shoot my next unit. Like the game kind of goes on.
yeah, 100%. So coming to the almost end of the episode now, um, I'll ask the same thing I asked to Peter last time. Do you have? I've sat here and I've questioned you for nearly 45 minutes now. Do you have any questions for me at all?
Uh what did you think to kind of how do you think there's anything the like players of Roses could have done to kind of make it more marketable?
How do you mean? Um,
Like, is there anything you'd like to see kind of that you could put on the Instagram? Because obviously there was Henry at York had this like really cool kit bashed army.
um, true. I didn't do it at the time because I didn't really think. But coming back from Roses and after I was like when I got round to posting the stuff that I saw, what would have been nice is doing an army showcase for each player and
Okay.
showing off like because the big thing about the hobby that I know a lot of people like my flatmates and stuff who don't have any interest in the hobby at all. What they always say is, "Oh my god, you sat there and painted these models for hours. They look so good."
Yeah.
And I do think like so. I'm trying to do the monthly Instagram showcase where people can submit the models on the Discord, and then I will put them on the
Mm.
Instagram to show them off. But there's not really that much that really happens with the society when it comes to like actually showing off painting. Other than that,
Yeah.
so I would for future events like wargaming events, I would quite like to do stuff like that where I show off people's armies because people spend thousands of pounds building and painting them. Um, and as long as you put the effort in and you think it looks good, there's no reason as to why it shouldn't be shown off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So what you think you'd like the society to become kind of a bit more like on the actual hobby side?
Yeah,
Have more people like kind of really trying with their painting and modeling, and then being like proud and wanting it to be shown off.
yeah. It's also like I've spoken to a few people who like I've had games with and stuff, like people who are new to
Mm.
it. I've spoken to one person specifically who, after our game, said I asked if they were going to come back, and they said no. I just like painting.
Oh,
So there are some people who just want to paint, and I think that's perfectly valid. Which is why I'm quite a big advocate for the hobby socials. I really like them, and I also think you meet a lot of people there that you don't really, you might not like. Reese, for example. Reese hadn't come to the society for a long time. And then I started speaking to him at the hobby social, and now I consider him quite a good friend. Like, you do meet decent people, and you've all got that one thing in common, so you can just have, like, crazy hour-long chats about just pointless things, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you come out of it, and I don't think anybody... Like, sometimes you can come out of a tournament and be like, oh, I didn't do very well. I could have done this better. Stuff like that. You can't come out of a hobby social, really, in a bad mood.
Yeah, I guess there's no doing bad at a hobby social. You kind of like you work towards this end goal of having a painted unit or a painted army.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'd like to make the hobby side of the society a bit more. I'd like to show more of it off, because there's some people who do absolutely crazy things at this society, and I think at the end of the day, it's art. So I'm a firm believer in art being shown off.
Yeah, I think especially if more people kind of engage with the hobby socials, I think everyone could kind of like learn a little bit. Like you're putting vodka in your paint water. That's actually like a really good idea I never would have thought of. I think like if I hadn't spoken to you while you were painting your Night Lords, I just like never would have thought of that, and like now I'm considering trying it. Like if it cleans the brushes as you go.
Yeah, it's just like I remember watching a video. I think it was like Squidmar or something, and he was saying like put like methylated spirits in paint water just to clean your brushes, and I was like,
Hmm.
I tried it and it melted some of my brushes, and I was like, oh well, if it's alcohol, vodka's like pretty denatured. It's like easy, and it does actually work a treat. So there's like little stuff like that, like you said, you pick up on things. Um, I used to prime everything on the sprue. I don't know why,
Oh,
but I went to a hobby social and people were like, Anton, why'd you do that? And I was like, I don't know, I just kind of always done it. And
oh wait, you primed stuff on this when you came to uni.
yeah, I still do. Like, not all of my stuff. But like before I came to uni, everything that I own was primed on sprue.
What? That's crazy. But like, so what did you do about like the contact points when you cut it off? Did you just paint over it?
Yeah, pretty much. It seemed to work.
No, like fair enough. Like your Blood Angels look really good. That's just
Thank you. It's quite
yeah. No,
unorthodox
that's
because I went from like with model aeroplanes, you don't even get told like when you watch like the videos for them, you don't even get told to prime it. So I went from like not even priming models. So you look at I can later on I'll send you some pictures of my bolt action stuff. It is terrible, and I remember sitting there with the bolt action stuff and being like, why does this look so bad? And getting pissed off. And then I got told about priming, and that was when I got into Warhammer. And now I don't look at a model that I own and don't feel somewhat proud of it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Um. So I think
Yeah, I think you
go on.
want to kind of feel proud of everything you own.
Yeah, I agree.
And it just kind of suck when you just like some of the Grey Knights for roses. I did just kind of have to like bash them out and kind of do like the absolute minimum just to get them ready.
Hmm.
I do just kind of want to like go back and like actually give them the love like they deserve.
Yeah, I will say though, I really like how you've done your Grey Knights. Like the
I've had like
baby
three people
carriers.
say that and they're just like not that special.
I know, but I think they
That's
look good. I also think your Death Guard look really good. Like Mortarion, I always look at models that people have painted, and want to paint those models. Like
Yeah.
I have no interest in Death Guard, but seeing your Mortarion kind of actually makes me like, oh, maybe I would enjoy painting that. I don't know.
I think that with more models like Morty and Magnus, I've seen some like really cool ones like online, which really kind of like make me want to like do a lot more with what I've got. I've seen a Magnus online where they painted his wings so it kind of looked like there was like eyes on
Mhm.
them.
Oh, I think I've seen that actually.
So rather than like what the GW one does, where there's kind of just this gradient of like blue to red or like blue to purple,
Mhm.
it was like airbrushed and it looked really cool. And it looked basically like if you squinted, kind of there was this like big pair of like eyes.
Mhm. That I I can't remember where I've seen that. I'm gonna look it up. Um, I don't think I can find it. I'll have to look later. Or if you find it, send me a picture of it.
Yeah.
Um, it does. It's crazy. You see what other people have done, and you're like, oh, you kind of yeah. I especially think like you get a lot of inspiration from other people. I think, which is why I think the hobby socials are really important and quite effective. So, um, coming to the end of the episode now, are there any things that you think I've missed out on or want to talk about?
Uh, I don't know. I'm kind of interested in what your. Oh, so you only ever heard war stories of like old wargaming.
Mhm.
Like, what do you think you'd have enjoyed it more or less?
Ah, that is a good question. I think no matter what, I was coming to university with 3,000 points of Blood Angels, and I wanted to play with them. I wanted to actually play the game that I'd painted the models for.
Hmm.
So, from what I've heard, I still think I'd have enjoyed it, but maybe not to the extent that I do. But I also think the actual crowd around it being different. So like you were there, Finley was there, but like big people in the society who I don't know if they were there. Was Liza a part of the original Wargaming Society?
Oh. Uh, no. Lisa joined about the start of third term
Mm-hmm.
last year, so Lisa was there for all of like maybe 8 weeks before the merger,
Yeah.
7, 8 weeks ish. Michael joined in around February, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I think like the only kind of people who were like staples of old wargaming that you've kind of like interacted with would probably me and Finley.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else, like what Jonathan was there, but Jonathan was like a fresher. Like he missed out on like an entire year of it.
Yeah.
Morgan was there, but Morgan was a fresher and only showed up maybe every other week.
Mm-hmm.
I think like from my point of view, the Lubats is probably better. The wargaming part of Lubats is probably better post merger, but I do kind of have like rose tinted glasses for like I don't say like the good old days, but kind of like what my wargaming society was.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're completely valid to have that opinion. Um, what parts do you miss necessarily?
Uh, it probably is just kind of like it probably actually is just entirely down to the people. Like there
Hmm.
was Steve, who was a PhD student, and he was like 40. Oh, I think he turned 40 while like we were at Wargaming, and he had this really cool Iandin craft world army, and Iandin are the craft world where they were like basically wiped out by the Tyranids,
Yeah.
and so he had this just like army of like just wraith units, and they were all painted really well. They all looked really cool. And then you speak to Steve, and because he was like 40 and he'd been in the hobby like since like second edition,
Hmm.
he just had a bunch of like crazy kind of like lore and like knowledge. Like he saw, I think it was Star Wars Episode 5. He saw it like in cinemas when
Jeez.
it came out. And yeah, somebody was complaining one time about like the Star Wars sequels, and he was like about how like the Star Wars sequels they're not fantastic, but then the third movie ruined the trilogy.
Hmm.
And Steve was just like, yeah, well, like that's what people said about the original trilogy. Episode 6 when it first came out wasn't really liked that much. It took years for people to like warm up to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think just having like Steve there and having this like kind of just like these crazy lore drops occasionally. Having there was the old Gensec Aaron, who was like a big part of wargaming for like what the 2 years.
Hmm.
Uh, Steve had been at because he was doing a PhD. He'd been at wargaming since before COVID, so he knew like the actual founders of the society when it detached from LERPs.
Jeez.
So he was just this like I don't want to say like relic, but he was this like member of like the old guard.
Yeah. I remember when my sister. So my sister's 7 years older than me. When
Mhm.
she came for her open day at Lancaster, I interacted with the Wargaming Society 7 years ago because my dad taught one of them, and I played a game
Oh,
of Bolt Action. Um, and I remember being like, "Wow, if this is what university's like, and there's people like this, I'm really going to enjoy university." And actually, when I was picking my options, because I did the third year doing Art Foundation,
mhm.
when I remembered Lancaster, the one thing that I kept remembering in my head was the Wargaming Society, and the fact that I knew there was one probably actually swayed my vote of what I picked.
uh,
So I do think there is a legacy that does need to be held up by upcoming and new exec in a way because of how you don't know if like on a taster day or at freshers week or something like that there's some like 7 year old kid who comes, moves a couple of models around, has a blast. You don't know if that kid will then come back to the university one day. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And I think it is. I think it's quite powerful. I think it's quite a powerful society. Because what child doesn't want to play with toys forever?
yeah. I think the war games can kind of like unite people of all ages.
Mhm.
Like kind of on the opposite to your story, we had a Blood Bowl tournament one time last year in like spring, and halfway through this tournament, this like lecturer walks in, and he was just like, "Oh my god, is this like Warhammer Society, like Wargaming Society. We were like, yeah. And he was telling us about how he used to play at uni, and he was just like, he's just had like 5 minutes where he like fanboyed about the fact we were like playing Blood Bowl the way like he used to play it when he like in like the 2000s or like late 90s.
Mhm.
And it was just like, you'd never have an interaction like that with a lecturer outside of something like this.
Yeah,
I do think
100%.
there's quite a powerful. It's very much like a uniter of the people having
Mhm.
this like common interest.
Yeah, I think that is probably the best place to leave this episode. So I
Yeah,
thank you very much, Alfie, for coming on this and sharing your insights.
thank you for
Um,
having me.
no worries. More than welcome to come back. So, thank you very much for listening to this episode. Tune in next week where I'll be talking to one of the members of the Magic the Gathering part of the society. Thank you very much.